You're listening to the OCD Stories podcast, hosted by me, Stuart Ralph. The OCD Stories is a podcast dedicated to raising awareness and understanding around obsessive-compulsive symptoms. I do this through interviewing inspired therapists, psychologists, and people who have experienced OCD. Welcome to the OCD Stories. And welcome to episode 495 of the podcast. And in this one, I got on Gina Abbondante. Gina is a psychotherapist and clinical director at Change of Mind Counselling. So 495 are only 5 episodes away from episode 500, which is really weird to say. I'm trying to think at the minute of how I mark this occasion and create something that's maybe a little bit different, but still interesting. So watch this space. But yeah, looking forward to episode 500. And thank you to you guys, because whether you listen to one episode, this is your first, or you've listened to 495, I deeply appreciate you listening. You listening is what keeps me recording. So yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. Thank you so much for the support. And in this one, I chat with Gina about her OCD story. So Gina is a therapist, but she also has lived experience of OCD. We also talk about panic disorder, having a panic attack as young as kindergarten, blood injection injury phobia, when OCD started for her, suicidal themed OCD, exposure and response prevention therapy, inference-based CBT, working with postpartum and postnatal parents, equine therapy, and much more. And a quick bit of fact checking from me. So during the episode, I kind of accidentally allude that my OCD started at Disney World in Florida. That's not technically factually accurate. It started at a diner in Orlando on my first day there. So I just wanted to fact check that to give Disney some credit. It wasn't there. Although the sole purpose of me going to Orlando was Disney World, Universal, all of that stuff. But yeah, it was just generally in Orlando in a diner. It was my first earliest experience of OCD. And thanks to our podcast partners, NoCD. If OCD is interfering with your life, NoCD can help. Their licensed therapists specialize in exposure and response prevention therapy, the most proven therapy for OCD. With NoCD, effective treatment that is 100% virtual is available for children and adults with OCD. And most members can get started within 7 days on average. No hassle, just real science-backed help and support between sessions. Begin your journey at nocd.com, or I'll put the link in the episode description. So thank you again to you guys. It does mean a lot. And thank you to Gina for her story and her expertise. It was great to speak to her about her story, about her experience of working with OCD, and even at the end talking about equine therapy. I find that interesting, and I'm sure you will do too. And without further ado, here is Gina. Welcome to the podcast, Gina.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. And I think, like I said earlier, I've rearranged on you about 3 times. Nothing personal, just my own life getting in the way. So it's good to finally get this done and interview you. I'm looking forward to hearing your story and then in a bit asking you some therapy questions. So
yeah.
But to start with, you can share your story, however you want to share it.
Yeah. So I guess the most important thing is that I haven't always had OCD. OCD came later onto the scene. But I have always had anxiety, specifically panic disorder. And I can remember my first panic attack. I was in kindergarten. I remember it vividly. And when I think about people that have panic disorder, they tend to fall in one of 4 categories, which is fear of embarrassment, fear of dying, fear of losing control, and fear of going crazy. And for me, it always led me to the fear of loss of control or fear of going crazy. And that becomes really important when my OCD comes around. So, through my childhood and adolescence, I can always remember being a pretty anxious kid. I struggled with school avoidance, lots of belly aches around going to school and test time. That was mostly elementary school, middle school. High school was pretty good. I got my anxiety more focused on performance-based and sports. I've horseback ridden my whole life. And when I was younger, I did a lot more competition than I do now. And anxiety really latched onto that fear of something bad could happen. I could get hurt, which isn't totally unrealistic when you're riding a 1,000-pound animal. But it really kind of got blown out of proportion. And I really struggle with like some performance-based anxiety. Looking back, I can also see how anxiety really infiltrated into when I went away to college. I needed a lot of things for like avoidance behaviors, essentially. So I would only go to a school that was a certain distance from home because I wanted to be able to come back home. I wanted to have a car on campus with me so that I could leave if I wanted to. And that was really all very anxiety, panic disorder driven because I didn't want to feel stuck. And for me, feeling stuck in in panic attacks also launches over into OCD, and we'll talk about that later. But I can see kind of looking back how, anxiety has really informed a lot and shaped a lot of my life and the decisions that I made. Originally in college, I was a Spanish major because I wanted to work for the FBI and be a translator. Um, but when I realized that in order to have enough credits to graduate, I would have to study abroad. And I didn't do it because I felt like I couldn't do it. I couldn't be that far away from home. What if I became really panicky and the anxiety got out of control and I was so far away from home? All those typical sort of panic disorder, agoraphobia things. So, fast forward, I had a lot of avoidance behaviors. I wouldn't drive over bridges. I wouldn't drive on highways. I would take back roads everywhere. And all these things I could sort of write off and be like, well, functionally, I'm fine. I just have these really quirky things that I do or won't do because I'm trying to not have a panic attack. I got married, had two children. That was a a thing into itself with anxiety because I had two very, very difficult pregnancies and had blood injury injection phobia, and nothing knocks out a blood injury injection phobia like having children. So that really helped to help me get a handle on that. And I guess it was really when things started to take a turn. It was what, maybe the summer of 2018. Um, Travel had always been a challenge for me my whole life, but really as I got older, I would make a lot of excuses for why I couldn't travel on planes or travel far. Oh, my kids are little, it's too challenging to do that. But really, it was anxiety. I didn't want to be in a plane. I didn't want to feel trapped. I didn't want to get have panic attacks. Didn't want to be too far from home. So we went to upstate New York. So I live in New Jersey. So we went to upstate New York, and there was this really cool place called Howe Caverns. So in a couple places on the East Coast, we have these like underground caverns that you can go and explore, and there's stalagmites and stalactites and all the cool stuff in there. And my kids were small. They were probably 3 and 6 at that point. So always looking for fun things to do with little kids. Let's go. We went. Um, and to get down into the caverns, you have to take an elevator. Now, elevators are a bit of a tricky thing for me because they're an enclosed space. I get claustrophobic. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get panicky, that sort of thing. And it happened. So I had a pretty significant panic disorder or panic attack in that elevator on the way down. Now, I don't know if this is just a me thing or someone that also has panic attacks. I have like gradations of how bad they are. So there's like panic attack, but like manageable. Then there's like medium panic attack. And then there's like 10 out of 10, I'm climbing out of my skin panic. And in that elevator, I had 10 out of 10. And I hadn't had an anxiety or a panic attack like that in, I don't even, probably more than 10 years. So I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Like I haven't had a panic attack like this in forever. What's going on? And I was like, it's okay. Just stay down here for 10 minutes. And as I'm white knuckling it, watching the clock, I'm like, you're doing a great job, doing a great job. As I came back up, I started thinking to myself, like, huh, what does that mean that I'm having panic attacks again? Like, that's weird. I haven't had one in so long. And there was like this logical part of myself where I was like, don't go there. Like, you know that if you start analyzing this, it's going to get bad. Like, it's just a fluke. It happens. There was a trigger. You know what it is. Just kind of move on with it. So I did. I was like, we're just going to ignore it. We're just going to move on. No big deal. That was probably July. And that October, so 3 months later, I guess it was, um, we had already planned a trip to Disney. We had been planning it for probably a year, 18 months at that point. This Disney World in Florida. And again, we drove. Now, we had driven to Florida several times before, and I had been okay. My kids were little. It wasn't like anything particularly out of the ordinary. But sort of leading up to this trip, I started having some anticipatory anxiety, like, I don't know. Why is this happening? I sort of chalked it up to it's a transition. My kids just started school in September. It was their first year in school. Before that, they had been home. There's a lot of things changing. I don't do that great with change under normal circumstances. It's no big deal. We're just going to roll with it. So we went down to Disney. It was right around Halloween because we went for the Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party for my kids. And we were driving down. We always leave super early in the morning if we're going to drive. And we got to North Carolina, which is about 4 hours, 5 hours away from us. And I had just a really intense panic attack. And so much so that I told my husband, I was like, I think we need to pull over. Like I need a minute to kind of like compose myself. Now, I'm not like someone, and very few people that have panic attacks are like you see in the movies where people are like really freaking out. I'm very much an internal sufferer. Most people never really know that I'm having a panic attack unless I verbalize it. Um, so he said, "Okay, yeah, sure, we can pull over. You can just walk around. No big deal." But as we're sitting at this rest stop, I'm thinking, "Oh my God, what if I can't make it? What if this is too bad? Like, what if I need to go home? Would my kids continue on without me? Would my husband go? Maybe I could like get my dad to come and pick me up." I'm like, "That's ridiculous. It's 5 hours away." Like all of this rumination is happening. So I finally decide, as any good person with panic disorder does, I've carried Xanax with me as my emergency support benzos for my whole life. And I said to myself, like, you know what? You need to like not make this so challenging for yourself. Just take a half a Xanax, give yourself a break, and just do it, right? So I said, all right, I'm going to do it. Took half my Xanax and of course felt so much better. I was like, okay, this is great. We make it down to Disney and I was there it was just the first day. My kids were exploring. We were staying at Fort Wilderness, which is like a camping themed resort. And I remember exactly where I was. I had gotten the panic under control, but there was sort of this like simmering anxiety in the background. And I was just doing my best to ignore it. But as we're sort of walking around and exploring, I just had this thought that popped up and said, if this anxiety continues like this, you're going to end up killing yourself. And that was it. OCD. I say to people that have, I say this frequently, but I think people with OCD get it. In that moment, something exploded in my brain and it was never the same. And I experienced just a level of dread and panic and anxiety that like I had never felt in my entire life. It was beyond terror. And I just had all these thoughts of like, oh my God, like I'm in Florida. Have I been depressed my whole life and I never knew it? Am I actually suicidal? I'm in Florida. I don't know anything about the mental health laws down here. Do I need to be hospitalized? Should I tell my husband? Am I going to ruin this vacation for my kids? Am I okay? Am I safe? Can I trust myself? All these thoughts just bombarding me in that moment. And I just remember being so terrified and also not showing it, because if you asked my kids today, they'd be like, that was the best vacation we've ever had. It was fantastic. And they have no, I mean, great, because I wouldn't want them to know that, but the amount of terror and pain that I was in, like nobody had any idea. And I was so afraid to tell my husband because I was like, well, is he going to look at me like I'm nuts? Like, is he going to think that I've totally gone off my rocker? Like, is he going to hospitalize me? Like, is he going to think I'm dangerous? Like, all these things. So I really kept it to myself. He knew that I was really anxious and struggling, but he didn't know the like logistics and like how deep it really went. And I just thought to myself, I just need to get through this vacation. It's okay. It's just because you're traveling. It's all right. Everything will be okay once we get back home. And it was a really hard trip. I mean, we were there for Halloween, so everything was like ghosts and goblins and skeletons, and I was like inundated with thoughts of death and dying, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is awful." Um, so I white knuckle that trip. I get home and I'm thinking, okay, I just need to get home. Everything's gonna be all right. When of course, in OCD fashion, everything was not all right. It got so much worse. I was ruminating constantly. I was Googling my thoughts, trying to figure out what was going on. I had never in my life had any thoughts of suicide or really would have considered myself someone that's like depressed. I tend to be I'm pretty sarcastic, but I wouldn't consider myself to be like, particularly depressed or like melancholy. So this just was a huge shock to me. Um, so I spent the next, I don't know, probably 2 months or so just totally mired in OCD and anxiety and panic attacks, because it became this like snake eating its tail situation of I had this thought that said if the anxiety continues, I'm going to become suicidal. And then that would make me more anxious. And then that would trigger the ruminating and the OCD. And then that would trigger panic. And it just became this cycle that spiraled totally out of control. I was waking up in the middle of the night, in the middle of a panic attack, like the kind where you're like, like just awful. I lost like 30 pounds in a month because I couldn't eat, and I was physically ill because I was just so 15 out of 10 anxious, climbing out of my skin. It was terrible. Um, and I remember particularly a really bad day for me was that first Thanksgiving, which is in November here in the US. And to be honest, like every Thanksgiving, it's a little bit of like a trauma thing because I remember how awful that day was for me. Um, and I was just convinced that I was not okay and I needed to be hospitalized and there was something wrong with me. I remember sitting on my bed, like after I had just, cooked all this food, and I was researching mental health hospitals, and I was like, I think I need to be hospitalized. And it was at that point that I really needed to tell someone because I was a mess. And I told my husband, and my mom and dad had come over, and my mom has struggled with anxiety her whole life as well. So I told them what was going on and these thoughts, and they both looked at me and they were like, okay, like I think a lot of people would have thoughts like this if they were this anxious. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I think there's something really wrong with me. And they they really kind of like gave me the reassurance that I needed in that time of like, you're okay and we're going to handle this. We'll take you to the hospital if you need to, but I don't really see that you're in danger here. You're afraid of yourself is really what you're feeling here. Um, and that was really helpful for me, but kind of gave me that hit of reassurance that I didn't necessarily need, because then that became a little bit of a reassurance seeking cycle where I would go to my husband or my parents and be like, I'm okay, right? Like I'm okay. Like if there was something wrong, you would tell me. So that became a little bit of a cycle as well. And then I still had no idea what was happening. Like I at that point had been a therapist for more than 10 years, and I had no idea that this was OCD. None. Like I thought I was like literally losing it. I had no idea that this was OCD until I was Googling my thoughts one day, and I Googled something along the lines of um suicidal thoughts, but don't want to die, or something like that. And up popped an excerpt from John Hirschfield's Harm OCD book. And I read it and I thought to myself, holy crap, that's me. Like this is me. This is what's happening. Like I've never seen anything describe what's happening inside of my head so well. It's like someone just like took a snapshot and put it on the screen in front of me on this computer. I was like, "Oh my God, this is a thing?" Like I had this moment of, "Oh my God, this is OCD relief." But then quickly on the backside of that, this like, "Oh my God, this is OCD and I don't know what to do with this." Um, I am a pretty like go-getter, like fix it kind of person. So I was like, oh no, if this is anxiety, I can just fix this. But if it was OCD, I was like, I'm out of my depth. Like I don't know what this is. Um, so I remember that day, my kids were in school. It was like 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, and I found my nearest bookstore. They had John Hirschfield's book. I got in my car, I went, I bought it, and I read that book cover to cover in like 2 hours, like just whipped through it. And it, there were so many parts of this, particularly he has a chapter in that book on a feared identity. And it just really resonated with me. Like, this is exactly what I'm struggling with. This is not about really like knowing that I'm suicidal or knowing that I'm depressed. It was more this fear of like, what if? What if I become this version of myself that I never knew before? This like feared identity. So then I started learning about OCD as, any good therapist would. I totally did a deep dive into learning about OCD, and I found the IOCDF and learned about all the different treatment options and exposure and response prevention. And I started thinking like I need to find a therapist in my area that can help me with this. Like I don't know if I can do this on my own. And at that point, this would have been what, like the beginning of 2019, I suppose. Um, there really weren't many therapists in my area that specialized in OCD. And the ones that did, I couldn't afford. Just the price was like way too much that I could afford and, reasonably do. So again, like any good therapist, I thought to myself, well, you know what? I think I'm going to get myself trained in ERP and I'm going to use myself as patient number one. If I can't find someone to help me with this, I'll do it myself. And, it was okay. I don't know that I would recommend that for anyone else to do it this way, because I do believe that I, without having someone on the other side to point out a lot of like the covert compulsions that I was doing and the avoidance and the things that I would kind of let myself get away with or I could justify, um, probably wasn't great. I think I would have maybe gotten to recovery a little bit faster if I had someone on the other side to help me. But, the situation was what it was. Um, and I would say doing ERP for myself, I did get better. I would say maybe like 60, maybe 50, 55, we'll say, percent better. But when I look back at it, I think for me, what the ERP really helped me with was the panic disorder. Because I still had a lot of doubts. I never really had a lot of physical compulsions, but I could hold back on like Googling my thoughts or seeking reassurance. But I had a lot of doubts and a lot of rumination, that I just felt was really hard for me to get a handle on. And the biggest question that I was left with was, why this doubt? Why am I stuck with this content out of all of the different types of content under the sun? Like, why this one? It just doesn't make sense. And I really struggled with that. It really plagued me. I just didn't understand how I could have gone from someone who really had no like history of depression, never have been suicidal, nothing, and this just like boom, and here it is. Um, so I at that point decided, okay, maybe it's time for me to start looking for a therapist again. At that point, no CD was becoming a little like bigger, and it was in my area. So I went on there and talked to one of the counselors that kind of get you set up with a therapist. And they said, well, we don't really have anyone in New Jersey, but we'll put you on a list. And as soon as we get a therapist in New Jersey, we'll let you know. You'll be a first person on the list. Great. And about 2 days later, I got an email from NoCD and saying, hey, we have someone in your area that's looking for a therapist. Would you be interested in joining our team? And I was like, oh my God, are they like trying to recruit me for me? Like this is the weirdest thing ever. Um, but they did ultimately about 6 months later call me and say that they had a therapist in New Jersey that I'd be able to work with. I was like, oh, this is great. Finally, someone that, I can afford that takes my insurance. And I worked with that therapist for about 9 months or so. At that point, like I would say I was a lot more functional. So we were kind of doing like some nuanced work in my OCD, but it got to a point where it just ERP wasn't enough for me. And like I said, I think it really helped with the panic disorder stuff, but it really wasn't touching a lot of like the doubts and the rumination and things. So I decided that I needed to kind of look for some other options. And this is around this time I found this group of other lived experience clinicians. Um, and these people, I mean, I hate to be dramatic, but they really saved my life having another group of people that understood what it was like to live with OCD. And one of those clinicians in the group also has the mix of OCD and panic disorder. And I was like, oh my God, like I feel like this is amazing to have someone. And the group of us, several of those people have been on this podcast before. So, like, not to name drop, but someone's like Bronwyn Schroyer and Rich Gallagher and Katie Merritt and Carl Robbins. Like, we were all in this group together. Um, and Carl introduced us to I-CBT or inference-based CBT. And I'm very open with the fact that in the beginning, I was really, really resistant to learning I-CBT. Um, I think the big thing for me was I was afraid to really get sick again. And I feel like I was at a place then where I thought, okay, you know what? 55, 60% better is okay. I can live with this. I don't want to upset the apple cart. I don't want to open Pandora's box again. I don't want to do anything that's going to make this worse than it was. I don't want to go back there. So I was really, really hesitant and resistant to like learn about it and grab onto it. And even as I started learning about it, I was like, I just don't get this. Like I can't, my brain is not wrapping around this. And I guess it was probably about 6 months into my learning about I-CBT because well, all of us in this group, we were reading the manual together and we were talking about our own experiences and kind of relating it to the text. And had joined, there's an I-CBT Facebook group, and we were talking directly to Fred Artema himself, and he was answering our questions. And this is fantastic. And I'm seeing all my friends like growing and having these big light bulb moments. And I'm like, I don't, something's not right. Like, I'm not getting it until I got to the chapter on the feared possible self, which used to be called the vulnerable self theme. And there was something about that chapter and learning that the content of our OCD is really born from our feared possible self. There was something about that. It just something clicked for me and I thought, "Oh wow. Okay, this is starting to make a lot more sense for me." I think it answered some of those questions that I had that before I was told like, well, you just have to accept the uncertainty. You're never going to know why you got stuck with this content. You're never going to know some of the answers to these questions, but I just couldn't live with that. And this particular modality started to answer some of those questions for me. And then as I was learning more, there was another point when we started to look at the use or misuse of imagination and the role of imagination in OCD and using possibility as evidence. And then things started to change more. Um, I'm a little bit of like a music buff. So I love all kinds of music. And there's a band called Guided by Voices. And there's a line in one of their songs that says, "We conjure ghosts and then we feed them." And I thought to myself, holy shit, like that's like for me, the essence of my OCD is like my OCD is helping me to reason my way into these doubts, into these fears, and then I'm feeding this with my imagination. I'm feeding this with using possibility as evidence and all of these things in an out of context way. And it just really it really moved the needle for me in terms of my own recovery. Um, and then on top of that, I started learning more about metacognitive therapy, and that even more furthered my recovery. Just being able to see, the value and the for me, it was a lot of um, like uncontrollability. There was this element of like, I'm not going to be able to control this. I won't be able to handle this. Like my thoughts and my doubts are things like they happen to me rather than these are things that I'm like aiding into this process. So that was really something that helped for me and learning about fusion beliefs and understanding how OCD works and how to learn how to step out of these processes. It was huge for me. I will say, and I say this all the time, is that for me, I still have OCD. Therapy was not a lobotomy. I still have OCD. I still have spikes. Depends on the day in terms of like how good of a day I'm having. Some days are really loud in my head, some days are not. Um, but I just feel like I have all these different tools and I don't think I could have gotten to where I am now without all of them, without ERP, without ACT, without metacognitive therapy, without I-CBT. I don't think I would be sitting here without all of those tools to be able to use depending on the situation that I'm in. Um, I just think that they're all incredibly valuable. And I think for a lot of people, because we're all pretty nuanced and quirky, so having just little things that we can kind of all bring together from different modalities, I think is usually pretty helpful for people. Um, yeah, so here I sit. So now, now that was my whole story, and yeah, it's all the gritty details of it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing. It's really interesting to hear it. And it's funny because you were on the way down to Disney World, where it kind of snapped effectively, right? Your brain.
Hmm.
And for me, my earliest memory of OCD was at Disney World in Florida as well. So
Yeah.
maybe it's something about that place.
I
Uh,
think it is. I actually remember listening. You had done a
mm,
podcast with someone and you had
yeah,
talked about your OCD story. And I was like, oh my God, another person where
yeah.
Disney World was the catalyst for OCD beginning. Yeah, there's
Excitement
something
of it.
about it.
Yeah.
Not the happiest place on earth for some of us.
Yeah, true, true. Um, No, but yeah, really interesting story. So from when, I mean, you mentioned like some of the earlier things when you were younger. What
Hmm.
sort of age do you remember noticing you were maybe anxious or panicking a lot? Or
Yeah. I would say, I mean, from reports, my mom and dad told me that I was always like just had a lot of trouble with separation anxiety and starting school. But I can vividly remember my first panic attack in kindergarten. Would have been what, 88, 89. Um, this was when we used to have half day kindergarten in the US. Now it's full day. I was sitting at show and tell, sitting on the little show and tell rug with all the little letters and a kid. His grandfather, I guess, was in the military and he brought a deactivated hand grenade to school for show and tell. It was the 80s, like
yeah,
things were different then. But I very much remember seeing that and having a panic attack in class, thinking, oh my God, but what if he said it's deactivated, but what if it's not? What if it goes off? I have to get out of here. And just that feeling of like, panic coming over me. That is the first and the most vivid memory that I can have of noticing that. Um, and then sort of throughout my life, like going on vacations was always really difficult for me. Going to school, I do remember having lots of belly aches before school, not wanting to go, calling my mom or dad in the middle of the day and saying I didn't feel well and wanted to go home. Um, you know, I never wanted to like go to sleepovers with my friends. I always wanted to be at my own home in my own bed. And I'm an only child, so my parents would just kind of chalk it up to, oh, she's an only child, she's got that only child syndrome. She just wants her things the way that she likes them, which is probably true to some extent. But really it was anxiety. I felt uncomfortable and I didn't want to be stuck in that.
yeah, yeah. No, fair enough. And where am I going with this? Sorry, my cat just clawed my leg, so it's completely thrown me off. Where was I going? Yeah, so kindergarten is what, 4 years old?
5, I think. 5, yeah.
Oh, five. Okay, okay. This is still very young to be
Hmm.
having a panic attack. And obviously very confusing for you, no doubt, at that age.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is that I never told anyone. Again, it's sort of that like, I think I internalized like there's something wrong with me. And if I look forward to like when OCD sort of entered the picture, I think there is a gap between, or at least like a bridge between having these experiences where it's like everyone else is fine. I'm the only one that's internally freaking out. All these people can go to school and be okay, and I'm not, right? And then, you know, feeling like there's something wrong with me. I'm crazy. I can't handle these feelings. There must be something like inherently wrong with me or whatever. And I do think that that sort of, if we talk about like how I got stuck with my own content, I think that sort of bridged into, well, you do. You probably do have something wrong with you. Maybe you do have this secret identity, this secret, really scary, messed up identity that you never knew about. And it's going to come out one day and, just burst onto the scene. Um, and I do think that that's sort of where it comes from. Because if I think of my feared possible self, I used to sort of dance around, well, maybe it's that I could be a dangerous person, or maybe it's that I could lose control, or maybe it's that, but really it comes down to I could be someone that has a scary secret identity. And that secret identity could be dangerous, or it could lose control, or it could cause me to lose control. Um, so I think that's sort of been like a vulnerable theme for me throughout my life of like, oh my God, I have these panic attacks. What if? What if something awful happens? What if it makes me go crazy? What if it makes me snap and something awful happens? And just kind of like internalizing that and not telling anyone um and really talking about it when I was younger.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, something a word, sorry, phrase you used earlier, I think was internal sufferer. Is that correct?
Hmm.
Is that, yeah,
Hmm.
just, I think yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to that myself. Wouldn't show symptoms. I would hold it all in. So I'd look fine on the outside, but deep down, you're sort of completely crumbling on the inside.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and often, as you say, when we think of people panicking, it's them hyperventilating, clearly looking frazzled, and of course there are people like yourself that hold it all in and then they go unnoticed for many years because
Hmm.
it's not getting picked up, it's not obvious. Obviously people that show it on the outside as well don't always get picked up either, but um for you now, is that something you've had to learn to share more of, like when you are struggling and suffering, to be more vocal about that or express, maybe? I don't know.
I think so. I think I'm more open about it. Um, when I look back at being younger, I never really talked about being anxious. Like I would talk about it with my mom and dad. Um, but I never really talked about it with anyone else. I never really opened up about it. And I feel like as I've gotten older and I've been through this experience, I'm much more vocal about the wide range of human emotions. And I do think that it has also gotten more significant now that my kids are older because, you know, knowing what I know, I don't want them to have difficult emotions and feel like they can't talk about it. So now I feel like I think my kids are tired of hearing me talk about emotions and like naming them. They'll roll their eyes at me. But I think I've gotten to a place where I'm like, I want to really overemphasize like it's normal to have anxiety, depression, whatever, like the whole range of human emotions to kind of normalize it for them, in the hopes that they'll pick up on my 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 cues and they'll talk about it and be open about it as well. Um, but I think I've also found that it's an opening for other people too. So if we talk about, or if I talk about how I'm feeling, or like, oh, I'm really having a rough day, my brain's really loud, it's easier for then other people to say like, oh, me too. Like, thank God someone said it, because it is a really isolating experience to feel like you're just kind of stuck inside of your own head.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So changing directions into you being the therapist now.
Hmm.
So you mentioned a minute ago about you're grateful for all of these different therapies and how they've
Hmm.
played a role in your own recovery. When working with people with OCD now, are you merging these therapies? Are you doing them as standalones based on what you think the client needs or wants? How
Yeah.
are you kind of juggling all of that?
Yeah. So I do a couple different things. So I specialize in working with perinatal OCD. So OCD that occurs either during pregnancy or up to a year postpartum. I also have clients outside of the year postpartum. Um, I often give people the choice. So, depending on where they are, if they're coming in and they're totally in the weeds with OCD, I kind of have to like take the wheel, so to speak, because they're like, I don't care. Just give me something that's going to make me feel better. Whatever. I don't care. Stop throwing letters at me. Just tell me what I need to do. So then I will just sort of make the executive decision in those situations. But oftentimes, when I have someone that's really, really struggling, we start with ERP. And really, I do not a whole lot of exposure. It's just a lot of response prevention, because people have to take care of their babies, they have to live and they have to function. So they kind of get that lived in exposure anyway. Um, but then I have some folks that they've heard me on podcasts or they've seen my website or they've found me somewhere and they're like, I really want to try out I-CBT first or metacognitive therapy first. And I'm like, okay, great, let's do it. Um, and then over time, maybe I might weave in some other concepts from other therapies. It just kind of depends on the person. If you have someone or if I have a client who's very much like boots on the ground. Nope, I just want to like do the thing and, get over this. Sometimes ICBT might not be the best treatment for them. They might need something more like ACT or ERP because it's more of like a behavior-based thing, right? It's very tangible. They have homework, they have this, blah, 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 right? So sometimes that's a little easier for them to grasp onto. Whereas if I have someone who is more like, asking more questions or having more doubts, or they need to understand the inner workings of the OCD, that's where metacognitive or ICBT might shine better for them. So it's a little bit of a dance with whoever is in front of me, and what their preferences are.
Yeah. Yeah. Good explanation. Yeah, because these are all useful therapies that there's no reason why we shouldn't be all learning them as therapists and
Yeah.
offering them. So it's great to hear how you kind of manage all that and weigh that in based on where the person's at or what they've
Yeah,
tried before. Or,
for sure.
yeah, nice. And I guess what made you work with perinatal and postpartum?
Yeah. So I that is how I started. Well, actually, it's not how I started my career. When I started my career, I worked with adolescents in drug and alcohol.
Mm.
And I just got super burnt out on that. And I moved out of the hospital setting and I got hired as a social worker um, in a perinatal clinic, so an OBGYN clinic. And that was, oh my gosh, it was so long ago now, maybe 15 years ago or so, 16, something like that. They needed a social worker, and I said, "This sounds great. It's less acuity than working with drug and alcohol in teens. It's not inpatient anymore. Yeah, I would love to do that." Um, and I just got like totally hooked by working with the population. And at that point, I was like, I don't even know. I was like early mid 20s or so. I was very young when I started working with the population, but I just love it. My mom is a nurse, so I always think that like I kind of know more about like health stuff because she was a nurse and would come home and talk about things and tell us about stories and cases and surgeries she's done. So I kind of like picked up on all the stuff that I learned from her. And then it was sort of the melding of the two where I got to like be in a medical setting, but I got to do therapy with clients and walk them through all different things. And it was also great because I was the only social worker, so nobody knew what I was doing. So I could just kind of have free reign, and I just did whatever I needed to do. So that was fabulous. Yeah, I loved the population, and I just stayed with it from there.
Nice. That's awesome. And do you feel as you've grown into motherhood, it's you can bring more to the role, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think as a 20 something working in the maternal child health sector, I knew academically like what I was seeing, but it wasn't until I had my own children that I then could like apply my own experiences and know it from a totally different angle. Um, so yeah, I definitely think that, my own experiences and having kids and going through pregnancy and postpartum and having difficult pregnancies and all these things, it absolutely led a totally different light to it. And then on top of it, my own experiences with, having a resurgence of panic disorder and new onset OCD added a whole other thing because I then realized like, wow, I've really missed missed a lot of OCD over the years. RIP to those clients. I hope they're okay because I missed out on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of it just added a whole other level of, being able to understand this population differently.
Yeah. 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 Good. And yeah, we don't know what we don't know what we don't know.
Hmm.
If I get that saying right. Um, yeah. But you know now, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, now you can't unsee it at this point.
Well, that's it. Yeah, exactly. You know it instantly the moment you see it, right?
Hmm.
Um, So, I read on your website that you do or did equine therapy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those that aren't familiar, because I didn't understand the word equine until well into my 20s. It's horses. How long you been doing that? Do you still do it?
Yeah.
Anything you want to say on it?
Yeah, so I've ridden horses my whole life. I was like 6 or 7 when I took my first lesson. I live on a horse farm, and I always knew that I wanted to incorporate horses in some capacity. I just wasn't sure what it was going to look like. And then when I was in grad school, so this was probably 2006, 7, something like that. Um, I found this organization, which is called EGALA. It stands for Equine Assisted Growth and Learning. And they did trainings on equine assisted psychotherapy. And I was like, oh my God, this is a thing. Like, I'm totally going to do this training. And it was great. I think it was 4 days long. And a lot of times when people think of equine assisted therapy, they think of therapeutic riding. So that's more for people that have physical limitations or handicaps or neurodevelopmental disorders. And it's almost like physical therapy for on horses. So this is quite different. So there's no riding involved. It's all done on the ground. And I have a whole bunch of different activities that I would do with clients with the horses. So one of the more popular activities that I do with clients is we do what's called equine billiards, where I kind of set the arena up with pockets like a pool table, and the person they're given the instructions of, I want you to get the horse into each of those pockets, but you can't touch the horse, you can't bribe the horse, and you can't like put anything on them. So no halter or lead rope or anything. So they have to really think creatively about how they're going to accomplish this goal. Um, and it's just very interesting to kind of see the metaphors in terms of, what are the ways that they communicate with the horse? How is the horse then communicating and reflecting body language back to them? Are they picking up on those body language cues? What are the boundaries? Are they allowing the horse to just like totally bulldoze them? Are they holding firm with their own boundaries? So there's so much metaphor work to be done there. Um, it's amazing. I've seen some really, really cool things happen with equine assisted psychotherapy, or EAP for short. I do still do it. COVID put a little bit of a chink in those in my plans with equine therapy, but I get a fair amount of people still that are interested in it and wanna try it.
Amazing. Do you do it with people with OCD as well?
I have, yeah. So it's like it's a little bit of like a sidestep out of the OCD specific work. So it's almost a little bit like a lived exposure for them, right? So we're doing some of this more like metaphor work, relational work, but they're still having to, if they have contamination OCD, they have to still be outside with the animals. If they have harm OCD, they're still in the presence of the animals. Pedophilia OCD, like there's all these different things that sort of happen in conjunction with it, but it's not the sole focus of the work, if that makes sense. We're sort of like sidestepping out of that.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, because I did, and I probably well over a year ago now did like a taster session in equine therapy because a former guest of the podcast, Ed, he got into helping a charity here in the UK that does equine therapy, and so he invited me along, and they invited other healthcare professionals, and yeah, we obviously got to meet the horse, to spend time, and then they didn't do the whole billiards, but they did the whole, you've got to lead the horse around the arena without, as you
Hmm.
say, touching it or giving it carrots or whatever.
Yeah.
um and luckily it followed me until it saw the gate and then decided it didn't want to listen anymore.
Yep.
But it's something about, yeah, you've got to have that confidence, and then it sees that and it will trust and follow you. So I imagine for someone who isn't confident in that way, then when you finally get to do it and the horse does listen, it's probably a very powerful feeling because, yeah, for me, having this huge animal, this massive head next to me, following me, watching me,
Yep.
you know, as I move, it's quite it gives you a good feeling.
Yeah. It's very cool. I've seen such, I've had clients where we did talk therapy for years, and I just have one session. I bring them out with the horses, and the breakthroughs that they have in just one session is wild, you know. Um, Horses are amazing animals, and really to the most people on that come here and want to do equine therapy, the ones that they're drawn to the most are my donkeys. So I have two mini donkeys, and horses tend to be more flighty and a little more difficult, but my donkeys they're very stoic, but they'll also push your buttons in like very sneaky ways. And for whatever reason, they are like the star. Every time they'll even like if we're working, doing a session, they'll just kind of interject themselves. And then we talk about like, what's this like for you? Does this represent anything? And just the things that come up it's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, donkeys now they have to work harder. So, yeah, the horses are just, yeah, they know they're the best, so they stop trying.
Right.
Um, so yeah, and then the mini donkeys you said that reminds me of like the size of like the one in Shrek. Is it that sort of?
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much about that same size. Yeah.
Well, then again, that might be a normal sized donkey, but Shrek might be massive.
Oh, that's true.
I
I guess
always
that's
thought
all
about
about
that.
it's all about
Yeah.
the scale and context in that, I
But if
suppose.
Shrek was a human, then that size donkey.
Yes.
Very cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
awesome.
like, I'm looking at them right now. They're probably a little taller than I have a German Shepherd. They're like a little taller than that.
Oh wow, so they're really quite. I mean, German Shepherds can get pretty big, but still, yeah, that's quite small. All right, cool, nice. I like it. No, I got, yeah, after that taster session, I was like, cool, I'd love to research this. How could I do this for OCD? I don't expect it to cure OCD, but
Sure.
it must be some sort of role. And for certain people, especially with, say, autism, who maybe struggle to
Yeah.
communicate at times,
Mm-hmm.
the horses just communicate on a whole different level.
Yeah, totally. It's very cool. I love it. And I think, now it's what, 20 years later since I did that training, there's way more research. At that point, it was just very much emerging.
Mhm.
And there was just a couple of practitioners, at least here in the US, and it was mostly out west. So in like Montana and Wyoming, and I'm on the East Coast, so there was like nothing. But now there's a lot more research, a lot more of an evidence base than it had when I started.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a billboard. What do you want written on that billboard?
Oh, the infamous question. So, um, I have this poem that I come back to frequently, and it was something that really helped me in the early days of my own OCD and the relapse with my panic disorder. And it sounds like this. Come to the edge, he said. We can't, we're afraid, they responded. Come to the edge, he said. We can't, we will fall, they responded. Come to the edge, he said. And so they came, and he pushed them, and they flew. And I just love that poem. And I think, I mean, you could apply it to so many different things, but I think in terms of OCD recovery, like we have to do that, right? We have to kind of push past those fears and bring ourselves to the edge of what we think we're capable of. And, well, I mean, that might not be flying by the end of it, but it gives us such confidence to be able to do things that we would never have been able to even think that we'd be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that poem. Who's it by?
Oh God, I don't know if I can pronounce his name. It is Guillermo, something with an A that I cannot pronounce.
That's okay. People can type in the poem and find the author,
Yeah.
not the poet. And Right, so you could pick up the phone and call that 5-year-old you, the one that was having the panic attack for the first time. What would you tell her?
What would I say? So I would probably say, I would probably say you have to tell people what's going on. So open up. You don't have to suffer alone. Um, you might be the only one that feels what you're feeling, but it doesn't mean that you have to be in that experience alone. Maybe older me, I might say you have to stop avoiding. Don't let yourself be afraid of the anxiety. Don't let yourself be afraid of you. It just is going to grow into something bigger. Um, and then even my like older than that, I would say, what's my probably keep an eye on that imagination. While the imagination is a pretty amazing thing, know that it can be used against you too, and know what the difference between those two things is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that. Sorry, my mind was going in about a million different directions there. So, lastly, is there anything else you wish you could have said or shared?
Hmm, I don't think so. I guess I would say, recover as trite as it sounds, recovery is possible. And if one form of therapy isn't like totally hitting the nail on the head, try others. Don't be afraid to. Um, like me, I was afraid to try different things because I was afraid it was going to make it worse or I was going to get really sick again. And that's not really a thing. Just try different things and be open to different experiences and, you know, always keep in mind that recovery does not mean that OCD is gone. I think that people get stuck with that, with like, oh, if it's not gone, that means I'm not recovered. No, it just means you're a human. And recovery might look different than you expect it's going to.
Yeah, yeah, really good point. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story and coming
Yeah.
on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. And thank you to our Patreons who helped make this episode possible. And if you would like to find out more about Patreon and the rewards and benefits, then there will be a link in the episode description. If you enjoy the OCD Stories podcast and would like to support us, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to the podcast. And thank you to NoCD for supporting our work. And if you want to find out more about NoCD, you can click the link in the episode description. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.